The opportunity is for all of us to get much younger. Now, that's an emotionally difficult thing, to think of yourself as not just aging slower, that is keeping your health, but of actually turning back the clock. But that's where science is, and that's where all of you will be if we can make it another 5 years. That is, for us when we're older, to turn back the clock and function as if we're 40 again. That means since the average age here was 45, when you were born, you had a life expectancy of about 77. It's now about 82, but you ought to plan on living to 120. That changes everything from a pension company, and so to celebrate your 45th year, I'm happy to be here, both from you, ILC, and Red Salute. I believe that there will be a chance for me to come back for your 2050 for your 75th anniversary, and if the chairman wants, he'll be as young then as he is now. But to get younger, you have to stay younger now. And that's the opportunity of a lifetime. You have to start planning for it now. Am I too early? Well, interestingly enough, I patented with my co-author the cloud. I was too early. He stole it from me, and he got $635 million US from Amazon. I got zero. But my real disclosure of interest is I did write these books. When Real Age came out, it displaced Harry Potter for 17 days as #1 on Amazon. When the Owner's Manual came out, it displaced Harry Potter for 35 days as #1 on Amazon. And when You on a Diet came out, it displaced Harry Potter for still the record 177 days as #1 on Amazon and sold over 12 million copies in the United States. These are my other disclosures. The latest book is The Great Age Reboot, and just to show you, one of the co-authors, Albert Ratner, is 97. So you can do a lot of work productively when you get older if you stay young. The advent of your chances of being 40 again when the clock strikes 90 are based on the fact that the Human Genome Project has made major advances. When the Human Genome Project started, people expected to find 300,000 genes based on the amount of DNA in your nucleus. But they found only 22,500 genes, and only 1,500 of them were on at any one time producing proteins. That's what genes do, is they produce proteins, and that's what we are, the confluence of all of our proteins. What did they call the rest of the DNA? They called it junk DNA. But 8 years later, it was found to be switches which turn on or off your genes. And you control 93% of those genes. That is, by age 18, you have enormous control over how long and well you live because you get to control what proteins you produce. Your genes make those proteins make you, and you control it. That's why no matter how old you are now, you can have a do-over. You are the most powerful genetic engineer for you that we know. You can control you. This is what stress management does, and these are slices of genes from 25 nurses, and it's called a heat map because the red area, those genes up here, are on. This is 25 nurses who didn't have a stress management program beforehand. N1 is before, N2 is 16 weeks later, and M is a year later. They took a 6-week stress management program, and you see they largely turned off those genes up there and turned on these genes down here. What are those genes? They make proteins that cause inflammation. They make you older. By just doing stress management, they turned off 250 genes and turned on an equal number that change the rate of aging. You are the strongest genetic engineer for you, and the most powerful ager is stress, and the most powerful thing you can do is 3 things to combat stress. We call it 3 Ps in English: posse, purpose, and play. Friends, a purpose in life, and play. Give you an example. All genes do is make proteins or watch other genes, and which genes are on or off are largely under your control. When you stress a muscle, whether it is with cardiovascular exercise or resistance training, you turn on a gene in that muscle that makes a small protein called irisin. Irisin goes to your brain and turns on brain-derived neurotrophic growth factor, which increases your memory. Why did we do that? We don't know why that happens. It's probably for muscle memory. So in the olden days, if you learned how to avoid the alligator, you would remember your muscles how to avoid the alligator, and you survive. But what it does now is that exercise is one of the most powerful ways of keeping our brains intact as we get older. You are the best genetic engineer for you. This is what longevity has happened since the 1890s. It's gone up in a relatively straight line fashion. The purple is always larger or bigger in length of life than the green. The purple is women. Initially, the extension of life expectancy was done for things in kids like sanitation and vaccines. Now it is for things in old age like the drugs that treat blood pressure or diabetes. But in the next 10 years, we expect a huge change in this. That is, in the single decade, and if you mind, I love doing that, so I'm going to do it again. We expect a 30-year jump in life expectancy, unprecedented, and that's because of what the science is bringing us. It is changing everything. It's exponential. When the Human Genome Project started, it cost $30 billion and took 10 years. That same amount of information about your genome is now available for $40 and in 6 hours. That is, there's been a 8,000-fold reduction in the cost of science and a 12,000-fold speeding up of the process of science, which has enabled us for this exponential change. There are now 14 areas of research into the mechanism of aging that have taken 2 animal species each and turned them from the equivalent of human 90 to human 40. And I'm going to show you some of those most recent advances because it is important. But again, to get the benefits of this, you have to stay young now. Many of you understand finance and the rule of 72. The rule of 72 is if you divide your interest rate into 72, it talks about how fast money doubles. That is the same thing with risk if you don't manage it. So the interest rate for an LDL cholesterol of 180 and it being reduced to 70 is 8%. Or in 9 years, your risk doubles. So the sooner you get to manage that risk, the lower you keep it, and the more likely you are to be able to turn back the clock. So we started a program that did that, and it was based on, if you will, a physician filling this out on you and giving you money back if you got normal. Let me relate that. The Cleveland Clinic is a nonprofit organization, but our group, our CEO, believed in capitalist system. And so he said, how do we change human behavior? Well, you'd like to do that by saying it's good for you, but it doesn't work. Otherwise, we would not have people who smoke or who eat, if you will, a lot of junk food. So we started paying people to get healthy. And we started with $100 a year. We have 101,000 employees and dependents, and we wasted $4 million the first year. No one changed. But at a certain point, in the United States, it was $900. We got the attention of all of our employees and dependents, even our cardiac surgeons and cardiologists, and we changed behavior. And we saved, over the last 12 years, $1.5 billion in health care costs, and the employees have gotten $300 million back because they've gotten, if you will, normals on those levels. To show you how important one of those is, look at blood pressure. If you look up there, if you don't treat blood pressure, and this was a study at age 53, and you don't get it controlled under 120 and under 80, you have a 36% mortality rate over 6 years. But if you do get it controlled, it was 6%. You get to change your health enormously by prevention. And so this is what we did. We had 6 factors: body mass index, fasting blood sugar, cholesterol level, smoking or not, stress management, and then see a primary care provider once a year and screening. And when they did that, we went from 6% having the normals and 12% participating to now, to now it's 45%. 45% now have that. They live an average, by projection, of 15 years more disability-free. What did it save us? It saved us $1.5 billion. In addition, the employees got $300 million directly back, and they lived longer, and by the way, had 35% fewer disability days. How did we do it? We paid the employees to get healthy. And this is, can you do this at a non-health organization? Well, this is Lafarge. Lafarge is a mining company that mines gravel. All of you know that in the business trades, they did the same thing. So what is the problem with exporting that to all of us? That coaching, which we did, is expensive, and corporations don't want to invest in that. But in fact, with AI, you can make it much less expensive, which is what we've done. And that's how you get people to understand that they are a genetic engineer for them, and we can pay them to take the steps to do it. But let's now look at the future. The future is that with an 80% probability, that's because we have 14 shots on goal, and if you talk to any football player or any hockey player, they say with 14 shots on goal, they've got at least an 80% chance of scoring. And we have 14 shots on goal on the areas of mechanism of aging. That is, we now know pretty securely how to make you 20 to 30 years younger than your calendar age. That's by those lifestyle choices that we pay our own employees to do. But we think that the future is much brighter than that. And that's because of the 99.997%, 8,000-fold reduction in the cost of understanding your genome in the last 20 years. So there are 14 areas, one of which is how do we make our old cells young again? The problem with our old cells, when you get a cell that's old, it's like a piece of old fruit. It makes the fruit around it old. In the case of our cells, an old cell or a dying cell puts out a protein that tells the cells around it to get old. Why is that? Well, because an old or dying cell in the future was when you got stabbed and you didn't want to bleed out. So you made the other cells connective tissue, or essentially dead cells. But now, though, that's not a healthy thing. So one of the theories is, can we take old cells and make them young again? And the Chinese have done that in the last 6 months. They've taken old cells, and by turning on 2 genes, they did genetic engineering, gave a $5 pill to these mice. It's actually about a 5 cent to the mice because the mice are smaller. And those mice, their old cells became young. They lived 30% longer. And they didn't die of the same things. A second mechanism is to get rid of old proteins. As we get older, our proteins' 4th-degree structure, their structure changes because of things in our environment and things we eat. For example, when you have too much sugar, it gets on the hemoglobin protein, and it becomes hemoglobin A1C, less able to release oxygen, the reason diabetics get foot ulcers and kidney disease and heart disease and mental deterioration. That's caused by our eating too much sugar, changing the structure of that protein. And that's what happens with plastics in our environment and a lot of things. They change the protein. And so, if you will, I always ask a question now. Why do you get to a medical center fast if you have a heart attack or stroke? And most of us thought until recently that you get there to open up the blood supply so you save the marginal tissues. But that isn't really the major thing. The major thing is that when you have a heart attack or stroke, your dying cells emit a call. We call them exosomes. And the exosomes, if you will, excuse me, the exosomes call forth your own stem cells. Your stem cells go to that area, and they, over time, turn into heart cells. And that means that over time, you regrow your heart function. So after a heart attack, it has been common to see an ejection fraction decrease, the amount of blood your heart squeezes per beat decrease from 60% of the blood in the heart to 30%. And then over 6 weeks, it gets back to 60%. Why? Because you've opened up the blood flow, and then you call forth the stem cells, but you need an adequate amount of stem cells. And you say, well, how do we make stem cells? Well, we only have certain number of duplications on our stem cells because we have something that limits them called a telomere. We only get 50 to 70 duplications of our stem cells. But if we had something to enlarge that telomere, we could get more. And that's one of the other 14 areas. There are now, in fact, if you will, 2 companies, one a Hopkins offshoot and one an MD Anderson offshoot, that now say we can grow stem cells, increase the size of our stem cells in us with, again, a very inexpensive pill. And what that is you grow the telomeres at the end of your stem, at the end of your chromosomes, so you can make more stem cells, so you can repair yourselves longer. The third one I'm going to talk about is this one, getting rid of old proteins. So in this experiment that was first done in 1933 and repeated at UC San Francisco in 1967, if you hooked an old mouse with a young mouse, the old mouse became younger. And it was thought, how do we do that in humans? Can we get plasma from young people? And the conboys who did this spent the next 40 years trying to find out what was it in young blood that made the old mouse young. But it wasn't what was in old blood. It wasn't what was in young blood. It was getting rid of those funny proteins, those proteins with a deformed structure in their 4th degree. So it was not young blood, but getting rid of your old proteins. And every one of us can do that now. So this is the process. You donate your blood. It is centrifuge. You get your red cells back. You throw out the plasma. You get fresh saline and albumin. And the washed red cells and the albumin are given back, no risk. This procedure has been done for autoimmune disease since 1950. It's an approved procedure for autoimmune disease. But we're now beginning to use it for aging and for dementia reversal and for long COVID reversal. These are some of the articles. But in the AMBAR studies, they did this for people with Alzheimer's disease. And if you look at this curve right here, the red is what happens for the treated group. The black is the sham treated group, did not get treatment. And that's cognitive function. They did those protein donations here, if you will, changing proteins. And this is the timeline. And at 15 months, they reversed their cognitive dysfunction, as opposed to the control group still losing brain power. And they've reported at 36 months it still is occurring. Why? Because it takes time for you to get your old proteins out of your cells and out of the interstitial space, so it keeps occurring. And if you look at advances, these are the 3 drugs approved for Alzheimer's treatment. They're monoclonal antibodies, expensive, and they get about a 20 to 30% improvement in cognitive function. Therapeutic plasma exchange gets a 70%. Side effects, these are serious side effects of brain bleeding, 35%. No serious side effects with that. And guess what? Not only does it improve your brain, but it improves every other organ in your body. That is, every tissue that was looked at, whether it is muscle or heart or brain, gets younger. And these are the studies on it. So, if you will, 3 parts are available now in China. Taking old cells and making them young seems to help you get younger, at least if you're an animal. This is moved into human trials. Avoiding missignaling, getting rid of old proteins, that's available now. And increasing repair, the repair you do by increasing telomeres, that's in human trial now. The point is there are 14 of these shots. These are just 3 of them. I'm going to go over in the remaining time a couple more of them and then tell you what you can do. These are the 14, and one of them is what we call epigenetic reprogramming. How do we change the switches that control our genes? So a guy named Yamanaka from Japan found out that if you turn on those 4 genes, and you can do it with 2 inexpensive drugs, if you turn on those 4 genes, you take the DNA damage and you get rid of it. You reset your epigenes. And every tissue, when he did that, got younger. You became a 18-year-old, not a 60-year-old or 90-year-old in mouse terms, in human terms. What was the problem? The problem was that 20% of these mice developed cancer within the equivalent of 2 human years. But now 6 groups have shown that if you turn on only 3 of these genes, you don't turn on C-Mike, you get younger without getting the cancer. Those 6 groups, including a Swiss group, a Hopkins group, an MIT Harvard group, a UCSF group, a Google group, have now shown they can do this in dogs. You want a younger beagle? You go to Harvard, you pay them $17,000, and they'll make your dog younger. It's not a joke. They've actually got a real company that does that. It's an offshoot of Harvard MIT company. But it's now moving into human trials. And actually, it's being done in Italy by 2 U.S. universities. We will know these results within 5 years on this as well as many of the others. So another thing is what we call gene editing, and let me show you what's happened with that. In 2011, it was begun to do gene editing, and CRISPR-Cas9 was used. The same thing is being used now, but updated so that instead of just using it as a scissors, you can replace genes. It was only done in cell culture. Now it can be done in the human body. It was only done with blood cells. Now it can be done with any cell. It was done with a virus. Now that's changed, and I'll come back to this change because it's a huge change in cost. There were some deaths, there aren't now. And, if you will, sickle cell hemoglobin disease could be cured. What was the cost? It was $1.2 million per person. Now, and the major change was this that was learned about by the COVID vaccine, how to get the transfer into cells, it's 20,000. In this, since it's been done, it's only about 150 people have had this treatment because it's so expensive. We now believe we can wipe out 30 million diseased people who get the disease won't ever have it again after a $20,000 treatment. That's how fast this is occurring. Let me give you another example. And this is a part of stem cells. In stem cells, we used to use this for end-stage breast cancer, you'd wipe out the marrow, you'd give them stem cells, and it was only blood cells. You prayed that it take. There were a lot of deaths and some cures. Now, you grow it in culture. You can do it with any cell type. You insert it in key areas and cures. Where are we in this? Well, there are 3 people who had Parkinson's disease. They did this to them 9 months ago. They grew their stem cells in culture. They inserted dopamine into the stem cells. They produced dopamine. They inserted them into the brain, and they now are cured of their Parkinson's disease. Imagine that, taking a disease that would kill people and render them non-functional is now cured for what costs less than $20,000. Now, what happens if people live longer? If they live longer and work longer, they increase the GDP tremendously. So in the U.S., the average age currently of retirement is 61. If every 61-year-old worked just one more year longer, we would increase our GDP by $340 billion, and our tax revenue equivalently. That's $340 billion just for one age group. It's $58 billion in taxes and $34 billion in local government revenue in the United States. Imagine if you did that, if today's 61-year-old worker would keep working through 2034, that would be 3.4 trillion, and that's just one age group. Guess what? We solve the budget problem. We solve the pension problem. We solve a lot of social ills if we get to do that, and we're getting to do that. It is, again, 80% likely because we have 40 shots on goal. So we've developed a coaching program that does this, and let me give you some ideas of hacks. The first is reduce necessary inflammation by getting your flu shot yearly. The flu is a very inflammatory thing. By getting that vaccine yearly, take 10,000 steps a day. People accuse me of giving lectures just so I can do walking across the stage. Do what we call speed of processing games. Yes, if you force your brain to work faster with speed of processing, your brain stays younger longer. It isn't crossword puzzles. Doing a crossword puzzle doesn't change dementia. You'll get better at the crossword games, but you won't prevent dementia. Only forcing your brain to work faster does it. Call a posse. Call your friends. That's one of the most important things. Get to those 6+2 normals I showed. Do something called inspiratory resistance training. Everyone, put your finger on your belly button right now. Take a breath in. Take another breath in. You can breathe out now. Which way did your finger move? You probably didn't concentrate on your finger, so concentrate on your finger and tell me which way it moved on your second breath. Breath in, second breath. Your finger, which way did it move? Should have one of those things up to tell people. But in any case, your finger should move out. Most of ours move in because we're breathing with our chest. But our second most important muscle is our diaphragm. And as your diaphragm comes down, you breathe out. And you can teach yourself to train that muscle. And yes, there are some supplements like vitamin D and collagen that improve your muscle strength and are beneficial. And stay alert. Now, I'm going to go to brain functioning. There are literally 40 things you can do to improve your brain functioning. And anyone can have my slide set. You're all welcome to distribute it to anyone who requests it from the organizers. But keeping immunizations up to date, just doing 10 immunizations doing 6 immunizations for flu over a 6-year period decreased brain dysfunction by 40%. Anyone can do that. How tough is it to get a flu vaccine? How about doing physical activity? Is 10,000 the magic number for all-cause mortality? Yes. It's better than 8, it's better than 6, it's better than 4, but any amount is better. The more you do, the better. And it doesn't, by the way, doesn't matter your age, your gender, or your ethnicity, 10,000 is the magic number. How about for brain dysfunction? Again, this is all cause of dementia. 10,000 is the magic number. And anyone can walk 10,000 steps a day. We've even taken people in wheelchairs, and just by doing a couple more steps every day over a 3-year period, they're doing 10,000 steps and getting rid of their wheelchair. Speed of processing games. What is it? You hit the start button, and you have to identify whether it's a car or a truck, and you have to identify where the Route 66 sign is. And it's timed, 500 milliseconds. It's timed so you'll miss 20%. And what happens when you practice it? Your brain gets better, and your memory center grows, and you're 48% less likely over a 10-year period from age 73 to 83 to develop dementia. You are a genetic engineer for you. So what we did for our own employees, a large incentive program, and we coached it so that they did it if they wanted to. And 75% voluntarily signed up for it. At Lafarge, it was even greater. It was 83%. And the union reps were the first ones to do it. We eliminated smoking on campuses. We did a whole bunch of things to change the environment to foster people staying healthy, and you can do that too. And it's a team sport. I don't know whether the videos are going to work, but this is a male coach. This is the gentleman finishing his run, and you'll see he is stretching out. His coach is coming along. I won't even comment that his coach is having a candy bar. A bad choice. But this is a male coach. You'll notice as a guy, he doesn't ask any questions. He goes immediately and helps his friend. That's a male coach. As opposed to a female coach who will encourage you to run a little faster. And when you need to be picked up, she'll come along and pick you up. You want a female coach, not a male coach. To go back, the key thing is You want to stay young to get younger. And the keys, yes, blood pressure and smoking cessation, but stress control is by far the most important thing. And by the way, I'm always asked about the quality and quantity of sex, and it is. I have to write prescriptions for it every now and then. 5 tips: change your attitude. You are a genetic engineer for you. Only eat food. Food's a relationship. You wouldn't marry someone who is trying to kill you every day. You shouldn't eat food that's trying to kill you every day. Only eat food you love and that loves you back. Choose a team. You need a posse, and remember, it's a female coach. Add speed to your body and brain. Smells. Just 4 smells a day, intentionally smelled, decrease your risk of dementia. Coffee and olive oil daily. Manage stress and cultivate your posse and purpose. Thank you very much.